Welcome back, horror fans, cinephiles, and Giallo enthusiasts. This is Tanner Leeser, your host for The King in Giallo, and today I watched The Double, directed by Romolo Guerrieri in 1971. So, this film stars John Sorel, Ewa Aulin. I've been saying Ewa and Ewa Aulin and Eva, but it is Ewa Aulin. Lucia Bosé, Silvano Tranquilli, Sergio Doria, Marilù Tolo, and Giacomo Rossi Stuart, who's in it a little bit. Written by Valentino Bompiani, Sandro Continenza, and Sauro Scavolini. And this is based on a book called La Controfigura by Libero Bigiaretti. And this movie is also called La Controfigura and The Stand-In, which means The Stand-In, and Love Inferno as well. Forgive me if I'm not spot on with those pronunciations. Italian is not my forte. That would be German. But anyway, so yeah, let me talk about this. Also, I think let me mention real quick. Music is by Armando Trovajoli, which is good. But there were times where it was like really juxtaposing what was going on, which again, like I've said before, is like pretty typical of Giallo. It was just like even more so disturbing because of what was going on. I did take some notes while I was watching this movie for the second time. I watched it twice today, once at work, once when I got home. And that's partially because this is one of those movies that you really do need to be paying attention. Also because the copy that I was watching on YouTube was not very good. So hopefully we get this from Vinegar Syndrome or someone else, but definitely in need of a remastering, both picture quality and audio quality. The audio quality was all over the place, and you could tell that this was being pulled together from different sources. Like there was probably a DVD that was a certain cut, and then there would be, because you'd have like a mediocre, like, it's all right kind of quality of an English dub. And then you'd get like really shit quality for like a few seconds, like either the beginning of a scene or the end of the scene, or sometimes even just like a mini scene, like in its entirety. And for some reason, the version I was watching had like subtitles in I don't know what the script was. I don't know if that was Georgian or what it was, but it was just like, okay. And then there were instances that it was just not even dubbed. It was straight up Italian with no translation. And that kind of that got a little annoying, because it's funny, whenever they cut little moments, they actually kind of add something, especially for like whatever the movie is trying to say about the character or the characters. So whenever they make little cuts like that, it's always kind of annoying, because it's like, what did you do? You sped up the movie by like 7 seconds, but like, you kind of took something away from letting the audience get to know who this character is supposed to be. Whatever. The reason why I'm mentioning that I watched it twice is because even when it was the best quality in English, there were times where I could not really hear what they were saying. And upon my second watching, I had to go back and rewind some parts like 2-3 times because I still couldn't hear them. And I did take notes for certain things I wanted to talk about and plot details, because I knew I just would not be able to recall it all from memory like some of the other movies. And then I go and I'm reading the plot on Wikipedia, and there's some things where I'm like, is that what happened? Okay, so here, let me mention the plot, and that'll help explain what I'm trying to get at. So, if you saw the Forgotten Giallo film series that I did on The Double, maybe have a basic idea. We follow John Sorel. He's driving into a parking garage, comes out, and there's this older gentleman who confronts him and just starts shooting him. And he, super slow-mo, he's laying there dying. And then the movie cuts to flashbacks. So, kind of similar to Short Night of Glass Dolls, insofar that it's using the in medias res approach, where it's like, here's the middle of the movie, or actually in case of both of those movies, it's like, here's the end, let's go back and see what led to this. And again, this is something that usually in like modern horror movies I don't like, because I think it's very lazy. I think it's the filmmakers kind of conceding that they don't have faith in the story they're telling. They don't think that the audience is going to be hooked in the first 15 minutes, so they have to do something else to engage them. And usually there's no other purpose for it appearing in a movie other than that. This and Short Night of Glass Dolls, though, is different. I won't speak on Short Nine Glass Dolls and just, stretch this out, but you can watch my review on that and I talk about it. But for this movie, it really is interesting in terms of that you're seeing everything that led to this. I mean, of course, that's what it would be in any other case, but I don't know. I give it a pass. I give it a pass for this movie. And maybe that is because it would be a little boring watching the movie without it. I mean, it does work really well as a framing device to keep cutting back after every, several scenes and just keep seeing him slow motion dying on the floor with the gunmen standing there. And then you're still hearing like, the leftover dialogue from a previous scene or the upcoming dialogue for a new scene. It's like I could admit that it might be a little lazy for this movie to do it, but it pulls it off. It actually it works for the movie. It really does. Like I said, the reason why I don't like it in other movies is the other movies don't need it. So like one I always point to is Don't Breathe, which Don't Breathe does not need it, and also it doesn't help. In fact, like it's more of just a spoiler of like something that's going to happen at the second act climax going into the third act of that movie, which I don't like. This, we know how it's going to end, but it is very interesting to see how we got here. And so I don't think of it as like, oh, you're just spoiling it, but whatever. That's my personal opinion, but maybe some people agree with me. But let me get back to, okay, so the movie then cuts to these flashbacks that are out of order. And again, I'm reading on Wikipedia, it says this, and it took me a while into the narrative to pick up on it. But the movie is setting up that Frank, who's John Sorel's character, is an unreliable narrator, which if you're unfamiliar with that, it's a storytelling trope, goes back to Aristophanes in The Frogs uses it. It's essentially the character who is narrating what's going on, whether that is a omniscient narrator or it's one of the characters, whatever they're saying, don't trust them. Either it's because the narrator is exaggerating, or they're lying, or they're actually kind of crazy. A good example of this is The Repairer of Reputations, which is the first story in... but anyways, through the narrative, you're getting these glimpses of events that happen that aren't necessarily transpiring in the chronological order of how far we're going back, moving towards this final event. But you're also getting a mixture of fantasy, not genre fantasy, but these are fantasies of Frank's mind, things he would like to do. And so I wouldn't have necessarily thought of it as unreliable narrator. I would have just thought as, well, it's a Giallo. This is what, we're going inside his head at times. Anyways, so one of the first scenes that we get that's in order, because the one of the things that happens when we go back is there's a scene where it's like a first person POV as he's walking through an apartment. There's a young man who's shot dead, and then there's some scenes with like this middle-aged woman that he's fantasizing about or he's making love to, and that is Lucia Bosé, who you'll find out who she is as the movie goes along. But so we end up on the beach, John Sorel and Ewa Aulin. Ewa Aulin's character's name is Lucia, and she sees this young American man, and she keeps remarking about him, and Frank, who's John Sorel, keeps getting like, why are you talking about him? And it's like, understandable. It is. It's kind of like, why are you talking about this guy? What, do you like him? And this was something that I couldn't really pick up on because, again, it was really hard to hear all the dialogue. But they're supposed to be on their honeymoon in Morocco, I think. And throughout the whole vacation, you're getting glimpses that their marriage is not all happy. It's not all, what it should be or what it seems. Let me mention this. The first 5 minutes of this movie is fraught with nudity. It's like they decided, let's just get it out of the way right away. And I'm not going to I don't want to be a pig here and fawn over Ewa Aulin. But let me just say, at least this movie waited for her to be like 19 versus however old she is in this, because in Deadly Sweet, she's like 17. And yeah, welcome to Italy. But anyways, so yeah, she's like on full display in the first 5 minutes. And again, it's like, okay, well, she's an adult. So, okay, so they go frolicking on the beach, frolicking in the water. They're both naked, although we don't see John Sorel naked. And There was a really interesting short scene after this, or at least a couple lines of dialogue, which I made a note of it because I thought it was very interesting, although the movie seemed to gloss over it, because this was one of the scenes that was in a different, it wasn't in Italian, obviously, because I could understand them, but it was one of the scenes that had the like foreign subtitling, which means that this was cut from like an English version of the movie, which I really wish they left it in. She's sunbathing on her stomach, and Jean Sorel comes from behind her, and she's like, "You're blocking my sun."
You're in my sun again.
And the way the line is, like the actual wording and the way she says it, I thought was interesting. I'll say why. And then he lies down next to her, kind of like lies on her back, and she takes her ring off and gives it to him and says, "Here, hold this for me."
Here, hold it for me.
Why? Is it loose?
No. I want the suntan even on my finger.
And maybe I'm looking too much into this, but I don't really think so, because I think the people who all worked on this are competent filmmakers, and I don't think if you know what you're doing, every line is meant to be there. You don't just throw it willy-nilly just to fill out the pages. To me, I thought that line was very interesting because, first off, it was telling of their relationship, where Lucia kind of sees Frank as this obstacle, or this thing that is blocking her from enjoying things. It's it was very like, it was almost like on the nose symbolism, like, oh, he's blocking her son. Like, you could take that to mean a lot of things, whether that's her future, or that's just the things she enjoys, her blocks her from being herself, whatever. But I thought that I liked that line. I thought it says a lot. And again, some people might be like, you're dumb, you're overlooking this. I'm like, I don't think so. And then her giving him the ring, a lot of married people, you have pride in that ring. Unless you're very vain, you're not usually going to be upset that you have a tan line on your finger from where the ring was. A lot of people that are married actually kind of, like I said, they have pride in that. It's like, yeah, I'm married. And then if I take the ring off, you can tell I'm married still. Again, unless you're trying to deceive the rest of the world from knowing you're married, there's no reason to, again, unless you're incredibly vain. And to be fair, this is something I also gave into way further in the movie. She is supposed to be 19, and I think Ewa Aulin was 19, or like, she's got to at least be in her early 20s when she made this. But she's a kid still, essentially. So maybe it's just I don't like how the tan line looks. But to me, it was those two lines: the thing about him blocking her son, and here, take the ring. I don't want to get I don't want the tan line. It really, in my opinion, informed a lot about their relationship and her opinion towards him and towards their marriage. And I think you will see as we go further in the movie that there's something to what I'm saying there. They start making love on the beach, and instantly he starts having fantasies of her mother, which he's never met her. So this has to be an out of sequence, I don't know, precognition, or just, you know how Giallo films are with flashbacks and flash forwards. So after this, they're walking like back there, whatever the area is called, like further up the beach where you're actually more on like the ground. They come across they come across his car, and Lucia, ever so curious about him, looks into the car and notes, oh, he is American. Look. And they look inside, and he's got all these like really like, I guess you'd call them leftist radical books of this time. There's a book on Mao Zedong. There's a book about like the rise of capitalism, and then there's a book by Malcolm X. And Frank is really dismissive, like, oh, so what? He's like a rebel or whatever. And she's kind of makes a comment like, oh, weren't you an anarchist when you were younger, before like, you gave up on it, or before you had to grow up or something? And he's immediately, and like I said, it's justifiable. He's like, why are you so into this guy? Like, we're on our honeymoon. Like, why you keep talking about him? And they go out to lay out. I guess this must have been later. But they go to lay out on the beach. Sure enough, there's the guy out in the water. And as they're kind of walking perpendicular so they can go further down the beach, Ewa Aulin is like, oh, my ankle. And John Sorel's like, here, let me help you. And he's trying to walk her. And she's just like, oh, no, I can't go any further. We'll just have to settle right here. And so they settle on the beach right in front of this guy. And it's not like a minute into them lying down that Lucia opens this giant thermos and is like, oh, I'm such an idiot. I forgot to fill it. And she gives it to Frank, and he's like, I'll go fill it. And so he leaves, gets it filled, comes back, and the guy's gone, and Lucia is kind of laying now on her stomach again. And turns out, while he was gone, this guy came up and was talking to his wife. He immediately gets, kind of upset, kind of peeved, and she starts emasculating him, which, again, it's like, you guys it's not like you've been married for years and years and he's been pissing you off for years and you've got all this aggression. So she just starts just unloading into him. But she tells him that the man's name is Eddie Cannon, which is like the most American sounding name you can think of. And then it cuts to them in their hotel, I guess it is. And they're making love. And afterwards, she seems really distant, and he's kind of asking her about like a baby, and she's like, no, I'm on the pill. And then it like kind of just cuts to him getting like really upset and like finding her, bottle of pills, and confronts her. It's like he didn't know that she was on them. And she's like, idiot, you're supposed to, you take them before you have sex, not after. Like, that's how it works. And he just like throws them out the window, and he's like, go look for them. She makes like a little joke about like, oh, you fool, there's animals out there. What if they eat them? This whole outburst seems like he's not, obviously it's not the pills he's so much upset about. It's Eddie, although he is still upset about the pills. But yeah, so he's upset about Eddie, and then she calls him a failure, which is crazy. I think she calls him possessive, and it's like, well, is he possessive? Because he says, like, look, I don't mind the other men, like, gawking at you and drooling over you. I don't mind that. But why do you have to, like, kind of go out of your way to, like, give them a show? And, it's like, I get where he's coming from. I get where she's coming from. So I was like, I don't want to judge too quickly. But it's like, and then she says, like, oh, I'm so sorry that I don't fit into your, like, American ideal wife, vision. And, he wants a wife, he wants a baby, he really wants to kind of settle down because he's like in his early 30s, and, she's literally just became an adult. So she's kind of like, I still want to have fun and all this. Again, it's like, well, then why did you marry? Why did you settle down? And you will find out why. But I see where, like I said, I see where both of them are coming from. But in Frank's case, I do feel like, he has a point. Like, there's something to be said about, like, if you really want to be in this marriage, you probably wouldn't be going out of your way to, get the attention of other men, to make your husband jealous. That's the thing. It's like, why are you, he doesn't like it, and you're making him insecure. Why are you doing this? And I guess that's my final word on that, is just like, like, people could say, well, why is he being so jealous? It's like, what do you mean? Like, do you think she would be cool with watching him, like, go up to a bunch of young honeys and flirt with them? I don't think so. And he's not doing that. That's the crazy thing, is John Sorel, who always plays a fucking playboy, is not playing a playboy in this. Although, hold on there. But I'll give you some evidence to what I'm saying. But anyways, she goes on to berate him. She calls him boring, pretentious, and conceited. And then she says he's envious, and he's kind of putting the moves on her. Unfortunately, his character is a little grapey. I will be very careful not to use that word, because YouTube loves to basically hit you with revenue cuts. So I'll say pushy, and I'll say he makes it happen. Just know I have to use certain lingo here, but he's very kind of pushy with his wife, and while he's putting the moves on her and she's kind of just surrendering to it, she She continues to repeat that Eddie is charming. Eddie has charm. Eddie has charm. Eddie has charm. And then we go to this next scene where they're on a boat with a friend of Frank's, a friend of Frank and his wife. And the man, what was his name? Was it Richard? Roger, who's played by Silvano Tranquilli. Silvano Tranquilli. And they're talking about hippies and, how that fits into like a greater conversation about social beliefs and politics. And Roger says, who's older, says anarchy is only appealing to the young. And he's making this whole statement about like, yeah, once you grow up and you have to pay taxes and settle down and think about like your life, you really actually just kind of grow up and you just like, anyways. And so the wives are like the one wife, I think her name is Marie. The one wife, Marie, is like, why are you guys always talking about, like, why must you talk about politics? And like, we're not talking about politics, we're talking about hippies. And like, what do you think? And I forgot what she says. But then they ask, Frank makes a comment about his wife, Lucia, and he's like, oh, yes, she's very modest, very conservative, da-da-da-da. And she, like, just berates him in front of them. Like, I forgot exactly what she says. Did I make a note of it? I forgot what she says, but she emasculates him. She basically calls him out for being like a hypocrite and everything, and they all laugh, and he's just like, which, get used to that look. Poor guy is just falling apart as this movie goes along. And then that night they're like at this like party on the beach type of thing, one of those types of events that hotels always host. And he's watching on as Roger is flirting with his wife. And again, Lucia is pretty receptive. He's doing that thing where he's like leaning in and whispering her ear, and she's like smiling back. And it's like they're not doing anything physically wrong, but it's like he should know better than doing that. And she should probably, again, pick up on the fact that her husband doesn't like seeing her do this. But again, they're both kind of in the wrong here. So Frank is watching this and kind of just like falling apart. And then he notices Eddie show up to the party, and he's just like, fucking A. And then Marie, noticing Frank just kind of like looking off at his wife, being all upset, she then like lifts her leg up and starts kind of like rubbing him with her foot. And he looks over at her, and it's just like, the fuck are you doing? And this is what I mean. This is the evidence I was talking about. He does not reciprocate. He's like, not like, go back to my room. He's basically just like, what are you doing? Good boy, John Sorel. That's one of the few times I say that in this review. Lucia leaves, and then Frank goes to follow her, goes to find her, and he can't find her, and he ends up going back to the hotel, starts smoking, and then she shows up like she's been there. Like, I think she was like getting ready, like took a shower or something, but she shows up like all like kind of wrapped up, like she just got out of a shower or something. At least I think so. I think that's how I remembered it. She tells him that her mother is visiting. She kind of travels the world. That's kind of her thing. Like, she's just, I don't know what you'd call it. But yeah, her mom, Nora. And then they go to pick up Nora at the airport. A little later, we have the scene where Frank is talking to Nora, Lucia's mom. And Nora tells her that this is where we get some exposition about their relationship. So she's like, oh, like, Lucia said you're an artist. He's an architect, and he's kind of struggling. He's not really doing too well. But Lucia's father is like a diplomat, and she was looking for some stability in life. So she decided to marry this man because she saw it as being safe. Like, oh, this will be something I don't have to worry about. Which he's like, oh, yeah. And Nora mentions that, oh, she wanted to marry you. Like I know you didn't actually ask her. Like, she actually asked about marriage. And she's told me she really, really wanted to marry you. And he's like, she did? Yeah, this is news to him. That is, my wife actually likes me, wanted to marry me. But Nora mentions to Frank that, yeah, she did, but I'm kind of worried because, not to go there, but like, how much money are you able to provide? Because growing up, the daughter of like a wealthy diplomat, she's like used to like flying in her own planes and like having horses and dressing in the finest clothes and having a life of luxury. And it's like, I'm just kind of worried if like you can't provide that if she's going to get bored quickly. So that's some food for thought for him. But then later, when they're out on the beach, and it's, again, the two couples, and Frank mentions that Lucia is a lot like her mother, or I think she looks like her, and Lucia just like denies it. She's like, I'm not like her. And it's kind of like, you know, in front of everybody, kind of rude. And it's just like, like, wouldn't you want to be kind of like your mother? And she's like, not me. Ever since I was 14, I vowed to be like a completely different person, like to be my own person. And then Nora goes to run out into the water, and Frank's like, oh, I'll go with you. And he kind of follows really closely. And then they get out in the water. And as they're out in the water, we see Eddie come over like this ridge, and he sees them in the water, and he sees everybody else. And we watch as Frank kind of like gets really feely, like puts the moves on Lucia's mom, on Nora. And she's immediately like, what are you doing? Like, stop. And she swims, and she starts swimming back. And this is when Eddie comes up, and Lucia is just like swooning with him. And she introduces her mom, and the mom immediately is like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. And again, I'm starting to lose some sympathy for Frank, because it's like, what are you doing, dude? But, you know, still kind of feel bad for him, because he's just watching as his wife is flirting with this guy, and then his wife's mom is flirting with this guy. Like, they both like him. And then we have this little fantasy moment where Frank is spearfishing and like imagining that he's like shooting Eddie with a spear gun, and he comes back with a little fish. Again, this is another little jump. We see Nora and Eddie coming over, like, you know, a little beach dune, holding hands, and then they're off, I think, riding horses, which I'm like, wait, did that happen? Is that happening? Or is this all fantasy of him? Is this just him, like, you know, making a metaphor for everything? And then that night, at yet another one of those little like hotel beach parties, Lucia emasculates Frank once again. It's like, why do you have to do this to this poor guy in front of other people? And this scene, this was something I really was like, okay. Again, they're kind of showing that Frank has problems. You know, he's not without his faults. He's not totally sympathetic. But then they'll do something where I'm like, yeah, but now I'm actually giving him not a full pass, but I see why he's like making these just crazy neurotic decisions. So we watch Eddie dance with Nora. Like, he like kind of pulls her over, and like he's dancing with her. And then after this brief little tit with Lucia, she runs over, and they start like sandwiching him, like dancing around him, and he's just like dancing with both of them. And she's like, oh, the ladies are like, oh, who are you? Which of us are you dancing with? And he's like, I'm dancing with both of you. John Sorel is just watching, like, and Marie is like watching him like, oh, you poor thing. And yeah, so then we go back, we're back in the hotel. Lucia goes to bed, and Frank is talking with Nora, and he like volunteers to walk her back to her room, and she's kind of like, I got it, like, you're fine. Like, I think she's already like, I don't know if I like you, because you're kind of but he's like, no, yeah, I'll walk you back. And then he walks her back, and then forces himself into the room, and again, he forces himself on her, and this was, yeah, it was disturbing, especially because the music was so like romantic, kind of happy, yeah, but he's very aggressive, just kind of like kissing her, kind of pulling at her clothes, doing the little foreplay stuff, and she's very much like, no, stop, what are you doing? Now, she's not like fighting him, like pushing him off, but to be fair, it's like, what is she, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but like, he's physically imposing on her. I don't think she's fighting back, because it's like, again, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but it's like, ultimately, what is she going to do? And so she kind of just has to surrender to it. I mean, she's verbally made herself clear. Don't do this. I don't want you to do this. What are you doing? You're my daughter's husband. And he's just like going for it. And she's just like, And as the scene goes on, she kind of like, after she's surrendered, she kind of gives in. And then all of a sudden now she's kind of like, you know, grabbing the back of his shoulders, his head. And she never, I've noticed, like, there's times where it's like his face is dangling over hers. She never, like, goes in. She, you know, like, she's completely surrendered. But she kind of gets a little taken with the passion. But again, never, like, fully. It's never like she's ever the one. She's not, barely reciprocating, but she's never, like, initiating any, like, point of contact. She's just kind of a victim to it, subjected to it, however you want to put it. But they never take their clothes off. They never have sex. I think what's going on here is homeboy is impotent. Like, he couldn't get the job done. I don't know if he like had a premature episode here or he just couldn't follow through. But at a point he's just kind of like, and she just like pushes him aside, gets off, walks to like the bureau, smokes a cigarette with her back to him, and she's just like, get out. And he's like like crying on the bed, and he leaves. Okay, see, at this point it's like, sorry dude, any good faith or favor you earned with me before, or any time, any like sympathy or past I was willing to give you, it's kind of all gone now. So way to go, buddy. And then we find out the next day, Lucia tells him like, oh, my mom is leaving. She's going to be like flying back to Rome, I think. And he's just like, what? And then the next significant scene is like a little bit later, is we see Frank getting like a sniper rifle, and he's like up on like this ridge. I think I've already said ridge like 2 times already, so it's, you know, whatever. But it's like overlooking this road, and you know, we're like looking into the end of the sniper scope as he's looking, and then we're seeing him like aiming, and you see this car driving by, and it's got Eddie driving and Nora, and we never, I don't remember ever seeing or hearing a gunshot, but it's then like super slow-mo as Nora is like holding Eddie and he's like bleeding out, and we're like, okay, this is like the spearfishing scene. Did this happen? No, it didn't happen. I also wrote this note in here because I thought this was really, again, really telling. Little bits that Lucia and Frank are lying on the beach. Again, she has no idea what happened because Nora didn't say a word. Her mom didn't say a word, but he's kind of like laying again with like his like back of his head on her back, just kind of looking in the distance, and she's just laying there. I think this is how they're laying, and she just kind of leans over and she's like, hey, you want some? And again, these little details that I think, little lines that seemingly mean nothing, but in the context of the greater story, they mean so much. And to me, that little line of like, okay, so she's like offering him something. She cares about him. She's, like, do you want some? Are you hungry? To me, that says ultimately Lucia is not a bad person. And I don't think she's doing all this because she's, hates Frank or she wants to hurt him. The note that I wrote, and this is what I kind of said earlier, I kind of jumped the gun, is that she's like 19. And so you kind of got to give her a bit of a pass for being immature, for doing things that are a little selfish, because ultimately she's not as mature as him and not as grown up as him. And when she does these things, I think they're a reflection of how she's actually upset with herself for making this decision, because she didn't want to marry, I don't think, but she knew it was the smart thing to do. Given, like, she's not a total rebel, which is interesting. She kind of puts on this persona of like, oh yeah, I'm kind of like with it. I'm a little bit of, I'm a rebel, but it's like, no, you're not. You're not. But you want to keep playing it, but you kind of are wise enough to know, like, your parents did a good job of at least kind of instilling into you that it's like you need to look, like 10 steps ahead at life. You can't just be so frivolous or so doing whatever you want. Think about your future. I think that's kind of what's going on there, at least, like, and I think so. She's a little upset with the predicament and how she sees Frank as this, he's boring, he's old, he doesn't want to have fun, and it's just like, okay, well, but again, this was your decision. So I think this all shows that she's kind of upset with herself. And at the end of the day, she does care about this person. She does care about Frank. I don't think she's that bad. And I said, Frank is worse. Eddie is the worst. And I'm like, actually, now that I've seen like the whole movie, I've seen the whole movie twice, I don't know. But I do say this about Eddie. why are you flirting with another man's wife? Or at least, even if you're not necessarily initiating the flirting, why are you allowing her? You know, it's just, there's just certain lines that you don't cross. And it's like, what do you like? You can be oblivious, like, oh, I like, maybe you're a hopeless romantic, or you don't know she's married. But I really didn't like Eddie, because I was just like, dude, you don't do that. You don't do that. Like, and yet you are. But anyways, then there's a scene which I think we're back in Rome or something, and Frank is going to, I think, Lucia's apartment, or he's looking for her. I think he's looking for it. Look, this part was a little like, wait, what? Wikipedia says, which I thought was interesting, because I was like, is that what happened? Frank soon finds out Nora is in Rome, all his attention on her, to the point he tries to call her and get her to let him in his apartment. And then outside the building, Frank sees a man revealed to be Frank's eventual shooter. So I guess that's what happened. Again, it was really hard to follow. I couldn't always hear everything. But he passes this older man who we know is the man who will eventually shoot him. And they have this awkward moment where the man passes him, and Frank is kind of just like, the fuck are you looking at? And then the guy gets in the elevator, and he's kind of mad dogging Frank, and Frank's just kind of like, fuck you want, dude? And he goes down. And then the next significant scene is Frank meets with his brother, who's playing tennis. And again, like, we get a little bit more about what's going on. I think there was a little bit about this earlier, is that his brother owns like I think it's like a brick company, like manufacturing company. And something, I think that, like, he's telling him that there's like a workers' strike going on, and he wants him to like be involved somehow to help to prevent the company from going under. And in the course of hold on. Okay, so his brother runs a brick manufacturing company that's their family's, and their father had previously invested in the company, and they're on the verge of declaring bankruptcy if this workers union goes through. And so his brother really wants Frank to get involved to help save the company and prevent this from going on. Now, this is me reading this from Wikipedia, because, like I said, like, this was a part where it was like, I can't hear them. I really need a good transfer of this movie. So that's kind of going on. But what we learn from that is that while Frank has been struggling with his architecture job, he's been receiving dividends from the company. He's been collecting from a trust fund. Back with Lucia, we have another fight, and he calls her out for being a conformist dressed like a hippie while driving a Cadillac. And she turns and she says, better than playing with models at 30 years old. And then she calls him a drawing room communist while waiting for his dividends, criticizing the system while sucking it like a leech. She says, you're a bore. She says, worse than all that, you're a bore and an old man. So then later, we have another fantasy scene with Frank slapping and like ravaging Nora. And then we get another scene with Frank and his brother, they're at like the brick manufacturing company. He's like, I need an answer. Like, I need to know what you're going to do. And he's just like, I'll talk to you later. And so he leaves. And then, Lucia then makes up with Frank. She's like she's kind of apologetic. Like, she's just a little bit there for him. They, it's sweet, and they make love, but Frank is like really distracted. And I almost was waiting for the scene to like flash to him imagining Nora. It didn't, but he's just clearly like not there. Again, is he impotent? Sure seems like it. And she kind of like pushes him off, and she goes out onto the balcony, I think, and she just starts crying. And he comes out and he apologizes. He's like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know what's going on with me. Like, this doesn't usually happen, I swear. But he confesses to her that he's like, I think I'm depressed. So, they kind of have a sweet moment, but ultimately it's like all his shortcomings that she's been calling him out on are like really like magnifying, and like this poor dude is just falling apart. And then we get this part where the phone rings, and it's Eddie. He finds out it's Eddie, and he's trying to meet up with him, which I'm kind of like, oh, are you gonna try to kill him? And then he hears something like a commotion or something over the phone, and he rushes over, fearing that like Nora is there and that something's happening. But he finds Eddie dead, and assuming Nora must have killed him, he starts covering up the crime scene, like cleaning it up, and then he takes Eddie's body and he takes it to his family's brick manufacturing company, into the property, and he like drives the body into like a kiln, like a giant brick oven, covers up for the crime. And then we get this scene where the police are talking with Frank. They're just kind of asking him about Eddie, like anything he might know. He's like, I don't know. And they then show a picture of the older dude that he's passed in the apartment. And they're like, do you know this man? And again, thinking he's protecting whatever, trouble Nora might have gotten involved in, he's like, no, I've never seen the guy before in my life. And while this happens, it cuts back to, and it's been cutting back to the, again, him dying in the parking garage. But in this particular instance, the old dude leans over him and he asks him like, where is his body? What did you do with his body? Okay, interesting. So we find out that this man is he a physician? I think he's a physician, or they mentioned he's a professor, but I thought I heard them say he's a physician. Then we have the scene where Lucia and Frank go to pick up Nora from the airport. We find out she was actually in Paris, like this whole time. Not like, she escaped or whatever, but she wasn't even in town. So he just covered up a murder for somebody else. They pick up Nora, and before they get in the car, Frank asks to speak with her, and she's just like, I don't want to talk about it. She says something to Clinton. She just doesn't want to talk to him anymore, or at least about this. Like, just forget it. Like, they pick Nora up, and she mentions that she lodged with Eddie one night. Like, she was in the area and was just like, hey, I need a place to stay. And again, Frank has just got to be thinking like, this son of a bitch. He's sleeping with and she tells them that he was kind of in hiding himself. Like, he was hiding from this older man that she says, and they were once close. So it sounds like Eddie was gay, or at least he's bisexual. But I think the point that the movie is trying to make there is that all of Frank's suspicions, all his fears about this other guy, like swooping in, stealing his wife, or stealing his interest, who is his wife's mom, it was all completely founded on nothing. This guy was not interested at all, and so all of his suspicions were for naught. I thought that was really crazy. So yeah, I guess he used to be close with this older man, and somehow, like, I guess he broke it off with him and was just like, fuck off, and the guy killed him. And then the last thing we see of the, before he goes in the parking garage, is Frank drops off Lucia and Nora outside the house, and Lucia goes in, and I think she tells him to go park the car in the garage, and he's like, oh, of course. So Lucia goes in, and then Frank tries to talk to Nora again, and she says, and I actually had to rewind this a couple times because I couldn't hear her exactly. I think she says, I'm so tired of fighting, can you help?
I'm so tired of fighting. Can you help?
And she walks inside, and then it's like he goes in, and this is clearly like a fantasy, the way it's shot, the music and everything. He goes into he opens the bedroom door, and Lucia and Nora are both there, and they both look over at him, they both smile, and they're just waiting for him. And he like runs and jumps, and he flies through the air to land on the bed, and then it cuts back to him getting shot and dying. And actually, I thought that was interesting, that it was just like, wait a minute, because I thought the scene was gonna end with when Lucia says like, take the car to the garage, that it was gonna be like, that's what happened. But no, it was, I don't know, we're getting this fantasy that he's like, boy, I really wish I could have screwed my wife and my wife's mom at the same time. But yeah, so he's just lying there dying on the parking garage floor, and the professor is like, tell me, what did you do with his body? I must know, I must have it. And he just like doesn't say anything. And then all of a sudden the movie cuts into Italian because this part must have been cut. But these bystanders are like, "What's going on over there? You know, like the shot came from over here. Hey," you know, like they walk in and he runs off, and they're like coming in. They're like, "Oh, a body." I don't know. It's all in Italian. And then the movie ends there. Yeah, this was a good movie, and this deserves a restoration, especially because it would be a lot easier to comprehend what's happening. But I enjoyed this more than A Rather Complicated Girl in terms of these are both John Sorel Giallo films. Again, these are these Giallos that it's not about a killer, it's more about elites behaving badly. And this guy is an elite, I guess, but this one was just more interesting. I mean, Rather Complicated Girl had its moments, but I don't know. I really really enjoyed this movie. I really like John Sorel. I really like Ewa Aulin. Ewa Aulin, like any movie she's in, immediately I'm like, wow, I really like this one. And I feel like this one had more to say about these types of characters and their philosophies and their opinions on different social, political issues and taken into context with themselves, because, and they're very explicit with it, you know, it's not like you have to read too much into it. Like the lines that I thought was really interesting was when he was calling out Lucia for being a hypocrite. Like, you know, again, it's like it's like wealthy celebrities that are kind of playing this whole like, oh, I'm against this, I'm against this man. And it's like, dude, you make like more money than all the people you're claiming to like represent in terms of like political philosophy. So it's like, shut the fuck up. And then she calls him out too, because it's like, you're criticizing the system and yet you're sucking it dry like a leech. I'm like, well, I mean, that's a lot of the people, that's really true of a lot of the people I went to school with at Cornish. But yeah, it is, I thought the movie had a lot to say. And it's funny because this type of dialogue, this type of discussion, these themes in a lot of other Giallo movies, they don't land as hard. It's more of just kind of like dressing for the characters. And I mean, yes, that's what it is for this movie as well. But I felt like it resonated a little better. You know, A Rather Complicated Girl is for, in its defense, is actually really powerful with what it's doing too. And maybe is the better movie. I mean, it was nearly banned. I prefer the double. I just got more out of it. That's my personal opinion. At the end of the day, it's just what I think. And I'm not trying to say it was a great movie, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, let me know what you think if you have seen the double. If you haven't, are you interested in watching it? Have you never heard of this movie until I brought it up? Let me know. Any questions, thoughts, curiosities, or concerns? Yeah. And if you made it this far, I don't know how long an hour. God damn. This has been a long one. I apologize. I was really hoping it wouldn't be, but I just had a lot to say about this movie. But if you did make it this far, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much. And, you know, until next time, this is Tanner Leeser for The King in Giallo. And if nothing else, I'll see you next time.
I'll tell you when to take the pills. Now go find them.
Hey, what are you doing? There's chickens down below. You'll start them on the damn thing.